You wake to the smell of barley and smoke. The morning air is clean, thin, and still, the kind of stillness that makes even birds hesitate to sing. Then, from beyond the ridge, the earth murmurs a pulse that grows until your chest feels it before your ears do. The sky is clear, yet the sound builds like thunder without a storm. You look up, and the horizon itself begins to move. Before we descend into this world of fire and silence, take a moment to join ours. History lives because you breathe life into it. If you're watching from Istanbul, Manila, Buenos Aires, or a quiet farmhouse somewhere under another blue sky, let us know in the comments. It's humbling to think that across centuries and continents, the echoes of one story can bring us together. Now, let's return to the moment when the world first trembled. The Mongols did not arrive as an army. They arrived as an event, an elemental force shaped by wind, dust, and will. To the settled peoples of Central Asia, their coming felt less like war and more like a change in nature itself. In 1206, Temujin was crowned Genghis Khan, the oceanic ruler, his authority stretching as far as the mind could imagine. Yet his conquest was never only about land or plunder. From the beginning, he sought something far deeper, a way to reshape the very pattern of humanity. He understood that to destroy a nation, one must first dismantle the bonds that give it continuity: blood, name, and faith. Cities could be rebuilt, but bloodlines could not. Conquest, for Genghis, meant rewriting inheritance, and he pursued that aim with a precision that astonished even his enemies. When his armies descended upon the Khwarezm Empire in 1219, they did not simply sack its cities, they dissected them. Mongol scouts were instructed to map every village, to mark the strong men, the wealthy houses, and the women whose beauty was said to rival the moon. Chroniclers wrote that their spies walked through bazaars disguised as traders, noting faces, families, and features as if cataloging livestock. These records were not forgotten. They became the blueprint for an empire that measured victory in blood rather than territory. Genghis himself rode at the center of it all. Not a distant emperor, but a commander who carried in his silence the weight of an idea. His men feared and worshipped him. They said his eyes were the color of frozen water, and when he looked at you, you felt the horizon tilt. He believed the sky had chosen him to bring order to chaos, to impose one lineage upon a fractured world. And for him, lineage was literal, the spread of his own blood across nations. When the walls of Bukhara fell, the Khan entered the city mosque. The people gathered in terrified silence as he stood upon the pulpit and addressed them through a translator. "If you had not committed great sins," he said, "God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." It was both sermon and sentence. That line, recorded by the Persian historian Juvaini, captures the paradox of Genghis Khan's vision. He saw destruction as divine purification. In the aftermath of victory, his army's discipline turned coldly methodical. The Mongols divided captives into categories: men of skill, elders, children, and women of reproductive age. The first two were often executed. The latter two were processed. Commanders selected captives according to rank, while the most prized were sent to the Khan's encampment, where decisions were made not by lust, but by policy. The empire's expansion became inseparable from the proliferation of its blood. Whispers spread through conquered lands of women taken and renamed, of children born with unfamiliar eyes. Some chroniclers dismiss these as tales meant to amplify Mongol terror, yet modern genetic studies suggest something more chilling. Nearly 1 in every 200 men alive today carries a Y chromosome traceable to Genghis Khan and his lineage. Such diffusion cannot be the accident of chance. It is the echo of design. The genius of the Khan's empire lay in its dual nature. It could devastate in a single season and yet seed itself into the generations that followed. The thunder that shook the steppe was never just the sound of hooves. It was the herald of a silent conquest, one that moved through wombs and names and the slow, invisible drift of heredity. In the ruins of Nishapur, they said the soil itself turned to glass from the heat. In the ashes of Merv, they said the smell of smoke lingered for months. But what truly endured was something no fire could consume: the invisible inheritance of a man who believed himself chosen to unify the world through blood. As the dust settled and the riders vanished beyond the horizon, those who survived looked upon their empty cities and asked the same question: what does it mean to be conquered by someone who leaves his lineage inside you? The thunder had passed. The sky was clear once more, but the storm, they would learn, had only just begun. They called it the Great Tent. To outsiders, it looked like any other Mongol encampment. Black felt domes scattered across the plain, smoke rising in thin gray ribbons. But within its heart, behind layers of guards and protocol, existed a world few dared describe. Here, politics was written not on parchment, but in flesh. Here, the future of the empire was conceived. In the decades after Genghis Khan's unification of the steppe, the Mongol world expanded with a hunger that no geography could satisfy. Its borders moved like breath, inhaling, consuming, then pushing outward again. But even as the armies thundered across Asia, a quieter system took root behind them: an administration of bodies. What had begun as conquest evolved into a calculated reordering of humanity itself. Persian chroniclers, writing from the wreckage of their cities, described the aftermath in words heavy with disbelief. They noted how, after every major campaign, Mongol officials would arrive, not soldiers, but record keepers. They carried wax tablets, silk scrolls, and lists written in the square Mongolian script devised under Genghis's rule. They did not count gold or livestock. They counted women: age, beauty, lineage, fertility. Each category noted, evaluated, and filed. To the Mongols, this was logistics, not sin. The empire's structure rewarded obedience with flesh. A warrior who distinguished himself in battle was promised a portion of the conquered. But portion was no accident of plunder. It was an assignment. Highborn captives, known for refinement or appearance, were often sent to the court, where they might be offered to princes or to the Khan himself. Lesser-ranked women were allocated to soldiers, forming the invisible tributary system that fed the empire's expansion. At the center of it stood Genghis's own household, an institution of staggering complexity. His chief wife, Berte, commanded authority and prestige, but surrounding her were circles of secondary wives and concubines drawn from every corner of the known world. Tangut princesses, Persian nobles, Chinese courtiers, women of conquered lineages absorbed into a single organism of power. Through them, Genghis practiced a form of diplomacy both intimate and brutal. Each union symbolized the subjugation of a people, each child the guarantee of that people's assimilation. The secret history of the Mongols speaks with unsettling calm of this system. It tells of how, after the fall of the Jin dynasty's capital, women of the royal family were presented before the Khan. The oldest were offered as hostages, the youngest as wives. To refuse was to defy the will of the sky. To accept was to survive, though survival meant erasure. Those who were chosen were given new names, Mongol names, their past lives recorded nowhere. From the outside, the empire appeared boundless and chaotic. But within, its hierarchy was governed with terrifying precision. Regional governors submitted population registers detailing not only labor quotas, but reproductive capacity. In the city of Karakoram, where Genghis's successors built their capital, scribes maintained archives that traced the offspring of imperial unions. Sons of the Khan were dispatched across the empire to rule. Daughters were married into the aristocracies of conquered nations, binding loyalty through blood. A Chinese court record from the Yuan era describes how Mongol census officers requested reports of the comely and the fertile, as if noting tax yields. Persian historian Atamalik Juvaini, writing a generation later, called it a census of beauty. more terrible than death. His words tremble between awe and horror, recognizing a system that had transformed desire into policy. What did it feel like to live inside such a design? Imagine the camps at night, the low whistle of the wind through horsehair tents, the distant snort of restless animals, and beneath it, the quiet sobs of women who knew their lives had become currency. The empire's administration did not rely on cruelty alone, it relied on the certainty of obedience. Mothers who bore sons to Mongol fathers were often treated with cautious respect, for their children now belonged to the lineage of the conquerors. Those who resisted vanished. To Genghis, this was not depravity. It was order. He saw in the merging of bloodlines a divine symmetry, the unification of the earth beneath one heritage, one destiny. The sky is vast, he is said to have told his generals. Its shadow must fall on all men. If I am its instrument, then my sons are its voice. Whether apocryphal or not, the sentiment defined his empire's logic. Domination made sacred through reproduction. The empire of flesh was not merely a byproduct of conquest, it was its sustaining core. Through it, the Mongols manufactured loyalty. A soldier whose children bore Mongol features was less likely to betray. A noble family linked to the Khan's blood was bound for generations. Power replicated itself through intimacy. It was the most enduring conquest of all. Even centuries later, the echoes of this policy remained. In Central Asia, noble families traced their prestige not to deeds, but to descent. Across China, Persia, and the Russian steppe, legends persisted of children born with the eyes of the north wind. Each tale carried a shadow of the same truth, that the empire's reach extended far beyond its fall, flowing quietly through veins. When Karakorum burned in 1388, the archives went with it. Parchment, wax, silk, all turned to smoke. The records of who had been chosen, renamed, reborn, were lost to the wind. Yet the empire they built from bodies left a trace no fire could destroy. And somewhere, among the bones of that vanished city, lie the ashes of documents that once listed human beings as inventory. The handwriting is gone. The language is gone. But the system they described still breathes invisibly inside the living. For what greater empire can there be than one that conquers not land, but lineage? The wind over the Mongolian steppe moves like memory, invisible, unbroken, carrying whispers of hooves long gone. Centuries have passed since the last Mongol rider vanished beyond the horizon, yet the echo remains, not in monuments or songs, but within the living fabric of humanity itself. The empire may have dissolved into dust, but its founder endures in silence, hidden in the code of flesh. In 2003, a team of geneticists studying Y chromosome markers across Asia discovered a pattern that defied logic. From the Caspian Sea to the Pacific coast, millions of men shared a nearly identical genetic signature, one that could be traced back roughly 800 years to a single male ancestor. The geographic concentration pointed to the Mongol heartland, and soon the researchers realized what history had always hinted at. The echo in their data was Genghis Khan. 16 million men, perhaps more, bear the imprint of his lineage. It is a legacy not written in ink or carved in stone, but etched into the double helix of human life. The discovery reignited an old fascination. Western historians had long portrayed the Khan as both destroyer and visionary, a barbarian who built order out of chaos, a warlord who forged global connectivity. Yet the genetic evidence revealed something far colder. The scale of his conquest was biological. His empire did not end with his death. It continued in the reproduction of his blood, generation after generation, empire after empire. What does it mean when immortality is purchased through the suffering of the nameless? Beneath the heroic statues and sanitized textbooks lies a deeper paradox. Modern Mongolia venerates Genghis Khan as the father of the nation, his face on currency, his name on airports and vodka bottles. But the same name, whispered elsewhere, still conjures terror. The annihilation of Khwarazm, the fires of Nishapur, the emptied cities of the Jinn and Tangut. Every celebration of his genius casts a longer shadow over those erased by it. The empire's monuments were not built from marble, but from the silence of millions. The Mongols themselves believed lineage was destiny. Their chronicles record that heaven had stretched its blue mantle over Genghis, marking him chosen among men. His descendants, they wrote, were born to rule because their blood carried divine sanction. Centuries later, the genetic evidence lends that old superstition a chilling literalness. His blood did endure, sprawling across geography and time with an authority more absolute than any throne. Archaeologists in recent decades have begun uncovering physical traces of that biological empire. In northern China and the Eurasian steppe, mass graves tell stories that the chroniclers could not. Excavations reveal communities abruptly replaced. Skulls showing signs of blunt force trauma, followed by sudden influxes of remains bearing mixed ancestry within a single generation. In the soil of Central Asia, DNA analysis shows patterns of intermingling too rapid to be explained by peaceful migration. The data reads like a ghost map of empire. Expansion measured not by battle lines, but by conception rates. And yet, for all the data and science, the human cost resists quantification. Who were these women whose bodies became the frontier of empire? Their names rarely appear in the records. The Persian historian Rashid al-Din mentions a few: daughters of nobles given as tokens of peace, princesses sent as gifts. But for each one remembered, tens of thousands vanished into anonymity. Their children might grow up to serve the empire that destroyed their mothers' homes, carrying the blood of the conqueror as both privilege and curse. Some modern scholars call it the genetic empire, but even that term fails to capture its intimacy. This was not a network of administration, but of inheritance. Every child born of those unions became both heir and evidence, proof that power had crossed into flesh. Across the centuries, the descendants of the Khan would found dynasties in Persia, Central Asia, and China, the Ilkhans, the Chagatai, the Yuan. Even in their decline, they carried his spectral authority, invoking his name as both shield and justification. The Mongol collapse did not erase that authority. It merely dispersed it. The blood of Genghis Khan did not fade. It dissolved into the bloodstream of humanity, untraceable in daily life, yet statistically vast. Somewhere in a crowded market in Tehran, in a fishing village in Korea, or on a steppe where the wind still smells of horse and sage, his descendants walk unaware, fragments of a conquest that never truly ended. But genetics cannot tell us what history forgets. It cannot measure fear or the way a mother whispered her child's old name when no one was listening. It cannot resurrect the languages silenced when cities burned, or the songs that vanished with them. What survives in DNA is the outline of domination, stripped of its cries, its choices, its humanity. The empire's greatest triumph was not in its endurance, but in how completely it consumed those who made it possible. Perhaps that is the final riddle of Genghis Khan, that history remembers him as immortal while forgetting the millions whose bodies built his immortality. To them, he was not the oceanic ruler or the founder of nations, but a shadow that entered their homes, their families, their very futures. His name became a wound that healed into memory, then into myth, then into the quiet rhythm of generations. As the wind moves again across the steppe, it carries no banners, no drums, no war cries. Only the faint hum of life continuing, the breath of the conqueror diffused among the conquered. The blood of Genghis Khan has not died. It has only forgotten its name.